Do you want to draw yourself as a cute chibi? In this tutorial, I will guide you through every single step from creating the base to the final details so you can create your own chibi mini-me no matter your current skill level. And to make things even easier, I created a free template to help you get started. But with that said, grab your drawing tools and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do here is just set up our file, meaning we're going to create a canvas and add a grid. Now, if you're working with Procreate, we're going to create a canvas by tapping on the plus sign right here. Then this option here is going to let us create a custom canvas. And the dimensions we're going to work with here are 2100 pixels by 3250 pixels. Then once we have this canvas, we're going to create a grid, which you can do by tapping on the branch icon menu here. Then selecting the canvas submenu. And activating the drawing guide toggle right here. Now this grid is way too small for what we need, so we're also going to select edit drawing guide right here. Now there are quite a few options. The first two here, opacity and thickness, do not matter for the final result. It's just how the grid is displayed on your iPad when you work with it. So I'm going to set mine a little bit more opaque than the default so you can see it in the video. The one thing that really does matter though, or I guess the two things that really do matter here, is that you set it to 2D grid, and that you set the grid size to 380 pixels. And we're also going to move the grid a little bit to the side. So if you grab that blue circle right here, we're just going to move it toward the left a little bit so that we end up with thin margins here on the side. That should be pretty even. And then 5 squares width. The other thing that matters is make sure you don't have assisted drawing. That toggle should not be activated. So just leave it like that. Then once we have the grid, we are going to move on to drawing the base of our chibi, so the head and the body. Alright, so this step is pretty straightforward, but if you do want a little bit of a leg up, or if you don't feel like drawing the base, then I went ahead and created a template that you can download. It is completely free, and it has the head, this hand that is separated, you'll see why later in the video, as well as the body, the guides for the facial features, and the color palette I will be using. So again, if you don't feel like drawing the structure, then you can just pause the video, download that, and then meet us in the next chapter. But otherwise, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. It's pretty straightforward, so it's nothing to be afraid of. Here, we're going to use a free brush that comes with Procreate. It's a simple round type brush. It is in the calligraphy pack, again, that comes with the app, Monoline. And here we're going to have to pick a skin tone, but we can easily change it later, so don't worry too much about it. Try to find something that matches your skin tone, obviously, if you're trying to draw yourself. I'm working with this kind of dusty beige, and if you want to have the same color I will be working with here, you can go ahead and in the color menu from Procreate, in the value submenu, enter this hexadecimal code right here, so C3868B. So if you just tap here, you're going to be able to enter that code. And from here, all we're going to do is we are going to draw a circle in these 3 squares right here. And you can be pretty quick and loose, because in Procreate, if you hold your pencil after drawing a shape, it's going to automatically smooth the shape. And if you tap with another finger, you're going to be able to resize it. And it doesn't need to be perfectly aligned to the grid. We're going to do that in a second. But for now, we're going to fill in the shape, so you can just drag a color onto the shape and then drop it to fill it in. And then once you have that, we're going to zoom in a little bit. We're going to use the arrow tool here, and we're going to be able to reposition our circle so that it aligns with the grid. Now we're also going to use the arrow tool to tweak the shape of our circle just the tiniest little bit. So you can go ahead and pick the warp option right here, and we're going to extend this bottom section, so pulling on this blue circle here, to create a bit of a cheek. And then we're going to bring those sides that came out back in. So we're going to grab this corner here, bring it back in, and then this corner here, and bring it back up. Great. Now while we're working on the head, we're going to add the ears. They're super simple. We're going to draw half a circle that overlaps with this corner here of the grid. And then on the other side, we're just going to draw a slightly bigger ear because our character is seen 3/4. So this ear is partly hidden by the head, but this one is in full view. The one thing that is really important to keep in mind when you're trying to recreate a character, whether it is your own or you're trying to create a character from a specific style, is to pay attention to the different ratios within the body, so the proportions between the different body parts. The main one being what is called the head-to-body ratio. For example, if you're trying to draw a realistic human body, you're often going to use what is called the 8-head model, where the head fits 8 times in the entire height of the character. Now, for drawing chibis, obviously this is very different because one main stylistic element of the chibi character is that the head is huge compared to the body. So often you're going to see the proportions or the ratios in the chibis where the body is anywhere between 1 to 2 times the height of the head. So this is one reason I decided to bring this grid here in this tutorial. It's not just to help you see exactly where to draw the different shapes, it's to help you see the ratios that we're going to use in the chibis. In my case here, I'm going to go with a 1 head to 1 1/3 of a head for the body. Meaning if I have my head here being 3 squares, that body is going to be 1 head, so 3 squares, and 1/3, 1 more square, 4 square height. But those are ratios that you could, again, very easily customize just by changing the grid or by changing how many squares the head takes versus the body takes. So with that in mind, let's actually start drawing these shapes for the body. So go ahead and open your layer panel here, and we're going to rename our layers as we move through this tutorial just to make sure that we stay really organized. And to do that, you can just tap on the layer to open the layer menu and pick rename right here, the option at the top. So this layer, obviously, we're going to rename it to head. And then we're going to create a new layer underneath that we're going to rename to body. So chibi bodies are pretty simple to draw. They're very stocky, so it's simple shapes. It's really stylized. So we're going to start by drawing the torso, which is going to be essentially this rounded, kind of a bell shape. And it's going to start here in line with this corner under the head. And it's going to end up 2 squares lower in the middle of that square. And then pretty much the same thing in this square, maybe a little bit further to the right than the actual middle, and a little bit further to the right than the corner. And then we're just going to close both the top and the bottom with just simple, slightly curved lines or straight lines. It really does not matter. Now the legs are also pretty straightforward. We're going to start with the leg that is on the left. We're just going to follow the line we have here for the back. Extend it down until just a little bit above this bottom guide we have here. And then we're going to draw a little nub for the foot, like this. So down to touch the guide, then up and around to touch this vertical guide. And then you're going to close the leg by bringing it up to the middle of your bell shape right here. Then you can fill that in. And if, like me, you have any weird connection here, feel free to zoom in and either erase or just smooth the line by going over it again. Just popping in for a second, if you are enjoying today's video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I know this is a super YouTuber thing to say. Believe it or not, it really does help when you do those things. So liking a video, leaving a comment, subscribing to the channel, even sharing the video. It tells the algorithm that you are enjoying the content, which prompts YouTube to take the video and show it to more people. So thank you for your help. The other leg is just as easy. What we're going to do here is we're going to start with the crotch area. We're just going to bring down a line, but that foot should be a little bit higher because, again, our character is seen 3/4. And then just like we did for the back, we are going to extend that line to reach the other side of our bell shape, which in this case is going to be the belly. I'll make sure both feet match. Mine definitely don't, so I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger. Just like that. And the last thing we have to do here for this template, or the base, I guess, is adding the arms and the hands. And trust me, they are significantly easier than any other hands you might have drawn before because chibis have really thick, nubby fingers, which makes them super, super simple to draw. So still on the body layer, we're going to draw the arm that is on the left side, or right side first, sorry. And I'm going to have it wave, but you could have it just stand down to the side if you want. That's totally up to you. If you do want to have it wave, what we're going to do is we're going to start in this corner here between the head and the body. We're just going to extend a slightly curved line up to touch this vertical guide right here. And then a little bit lower than in the middle of this square here, we're going to add another slightly curved line to draw the bottom of the arm. Then you can go ahead and close it and fill in the shape. Now the hand, again, super simple. We're going to start by drawing 3 long ovals. The middle one being slightly longer than the other ones. And filling those in. And then we're going to add another oval kind of off to the side here for the thumb. And I'm just going to refine the shape of the hand here a little bit by adding this curve like this to show this meaty part of the hand. The other arm is just as easy. So we're going to start once more in that corner here between the head and the body. And this time we're going to bring the line down to meet pretty much that vertical line here. Bring it down to close it, and up. Might make it just a tiny bit longer than that. Yes, so it should almost touch that horizontal guy here. And we're going to draw this hand on a different layer because it's going to overlap ever so slightly with the body. And when we add clothes later, it's probably going to overlap with those clothes quite a bit. And so if we can just put the hand layer above the clothes layer, it's just going to make our life a little bit easier. So go ahead and create a new layer above the body but below the head and rename it to hand. Now this hand is also quite easy to draw, but it might be a little bit easier to do if you turn your canvas around, so literally just flip it upside down, and you can do that by just rotating it with your fingers, literally just how you would do a piece of paper. And then we're going to use the same technique, so drawing 3 long ovals, maybe not that long though, and one off to the side here for the finger, or the thumb, sorry. One thing to note here, in order to fill those shapes in, you're going to have to close the top of the hand. Because right now it looks closed, but it's just because we have the body. If I remove the body, you can see it's wide open. So if I go ahead and close it real quick, then I'm going to be able to fill in those shapes and create the hand. Now this thumb is actually massive, so I'm actually going to go ahead and hide the body again to see what I'm doing a little bit better. I'm going to set my eraser to the same brush I'm using to draw, so calligraphy, monoline here. I'm just going to make that hand, or that thumb, sorry, a little bit smaller. So feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to finish working on your base, and then once you're ready, we're going to move on to the next section of the video, which is going to be all about working on the face. Great, so at this stage, you're going to have a base that should look a little bit like this, whether it is the one you drew yourself in the previous section, or the template that you downloaded from the description below. And here I'm going to switch to my template so that my base that you see here in the video is as universal, I guess, as possible. But again, if you drew your own base, that is great. Now drawing the face might be a little bit intimidating, but I'm going to show you exactly how to do it step by step, and we're just going to be using basic shapes. So it's really not rocket science, you can totally do this. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw some guides to help us place the different facial features on the face. Now, if you have the template, the guides are already there, so you can just go ahead and activate that toggle right here and they're going to show up. Otherwise, I'm going to draw them manually. So new layer, renaming that layer to guides. And I'm just going to pick a slightly darker version of the skin color I've been using. The exact color does not matter at all. And I'm going to draw a slightly curved line that is going to divide the head in 2 roughly equal sections. And to do that, you can try to align it with roughly the middle of this square here. Then from there, we're going to divide that bottom section in roughly 2, just like that. Now these guys are going to help us place the eyes, and we're going to start by just drawing the white shape, or the white section of the eye. So go ahead and create a new layer, put it below the guides but above the head, and rename that new layer to eyes. And here I'm going to work with an off-white. I'm going to be working with the colors from my palette that I have right here because these colors are personalized to me, meaning they're not necessarily colors that you need to use in your own piece. Your eye color, your hair color, your clothes might be different colors than mine. But if you want to just practice and do exactly what I am doing, then I will always add the X code of these colors as I'm using them on the top right of the screen right here. And so you can do just like we did for the skin earlier and input that code in the color selector here, the value subsection, in the hexadecimal section. You can always add the code in there and get the same colors I'm working with. So I'm going to work with, to start with, an off-white. We're going to draw the eye on the left first and then create a copy of it and put it on the right. And we're going to have the bottom align with this guide we have here, the top align with this other guide. And we're going to start it where this guide intersects with the grid. So on that corner, out and up, and then back in and down. You can fill it in. And then you can hide the guides and just tweak any kind of weird connection you might have here at the bottom, or even tweak the shape if you're not happy with it. And once we have that eye here on the left, what we're going to do is we are going to duplicate this layer. So you can just swipe it towards the left with one finger and tap duplicate right here. Then we're going to grab our arrow tool. We're going to set it to freeform. And we're going to move the eye, making sure the bottom stays roughly aligned. Might be helpful to go ahead and activate the guides here. Sorry about that. I'm just going to activate them. Feel free to do the same. But then go back to your arrow tool here. And we are going to make sure it's aligned, yes. And we're also going to move it so that it's almost in the middle of this square here. What we're going to do is we're going to squeeze in that side a little bit, because again, our character is seen 3/4. So this eye, we don't see quite as much of it. And then I'm going to go ahead and hide my guides, make sure I'm happy with everything. And really that's it. That was by far the hardest part of the eye. The rest is pretty much straightforward because we already have our base proportions and everything. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to merge these two layers by squishing them with 2 fingers. And we're going to duplicate this layer. Rename the top copy to Iris. And then we're going to drag a rough version of your eye color. So in my case here, I'm going to work with green. Just going to quickly drag that on and fill in both shapes. And here, when I say a rough version of the color, I'm going to show you later in the video how to tweak your colors. So for now, don't worry too much about them. Really just try to focus on the shapes and the proportions. We're going to play with the colors when we start adding the clothes and all of those. Now this looks crazy though. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our arrow tool once more. But this time we're going to set it to uniform so that we keep the same ratio. And we're just going to make the shapes smaller so that they turn into irises like this. Now we're also going to move them a little bit. So I want the one on the left to be pretty much in the middle of the eye. And then in order to move the one on the right individually, or by itself I should say, we're going to grab our selection tool here. Making sure it is set to freehand, we're going to draw a selection around the iris. And with the arrow tool, we're then going to be able to just move that one and place it in the inner corner of the eye on the right. Now we're going to use a super similar technique to create the pupils. So go ahead and duplicate the iris layer. Rename it to pupils. And here we're going to use a nice charcoal color and recolor both sides of the eyes. Once more, using your arrow tool set to uniform, we're going to make the shapes a little bit smaller. And here, I'm not really worrying about the one on the right just now. I'm really focusing on the one on the left. Making sure it is where I want it to be and the size I want it to be. And then when it is, I can just use my selection tool, draw a selection around this floating pupil on the right. And with my arrow tool, put it where it belongs in the eye on the right. Great, now we're going to add the eyelashes to cap off the eyes because right now they look quite crazy. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything eye related and rename it to eyelashes. And here we're going to stick with the same color, but we might change to a slightly different brush so that we have something that has pressure sensitivity, which is going to allow us to have these crisp, nice ends, or points to their lines, I should say. So a free option that comes with Procreate would be in the inking pack, again, that comes with the app, the Studio Pen. But here I'm going to use a brush from my Ultimate Inking Stippling and Texture Bundle. So in the inking pack, the Ultra Smooth Tracing. Now this brush is not essential in any shape or form, it's just a brush that I really like, so I'm going to use it here to make myself happy. And if you do want to try it, I will link the Inking, Stippling, and Texture Bundle in the video description below, along with a special promo code you can use to get a discount. But again, not essential at all. The Studio Pen brush that comes with Procreate would totally work here. Let me see the size here. That's not too bad, maybe a little bit big. I'm going to set it to 4%. And once more, I'm going to focus on the eye on the left first. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw, or outline I should say, this part of the eye. And then I'm going to go out of the eye shape I have and create this, I'm not sure how to describe that, this smooth pointy shape here on the outside, and then this little shape with a dent on the inside. And then fill that in. Maybe just smooth that curve a little bit. And maybe make that a little bit thinner here. Yeah, something like that. And if you're drawing a male character, that could be what you use for the eyelashes. Otherwise, if you're drawing a female character, what you might want to do is add this triangle here on the bottom and thicken this outline section. So something a little bit more like that. And then just like we did for the eyes base shape at the start, we're going to duplicate that layer. We're going to use our arrow tool, and this time we're going to flip it horizontally here. So this option right here. And then we're going to be able to drag it, put it over the eye on the right. And with the distort tool, we're going to be able to squeeze it to make it match the shape of the eye on the right. And then from there, you can go ahead and merge the two layers so you have just one eyelashes layer. From here, we are going to add a little bit more interest to the eyes, so adding some lights. We're going to shade the whole piece at the very end, but the eyes look really boring right now, and it's just so fun to add lights, so let's go ahead and do it now. Go back on your iris layer right here, and swipe it with 2 fingers towards the right, which is going to activate Alpha Lock. Now Alpha Lock, you can also activate it from the layer menu right here. And what it does is now whatever we draw on this layer is going to stay within the shape that was already there. So with the color I use for the pupil and the eyelashes, and maybe a little bit of a bigger brush, the exact size doesn't matter, I think I'm working with around 20%. What we're going to do is we're going to draw a half moon shape like this on the top section of the eyes. Then we're going to pick whatever color we've been working with for the eyes. And we are going to make it a little bit lighter. So if you go in the classic section of your color selector, you can go ahead and move this slider right here at the bottom, so the brightness, move that up a little bit. The exact amount does not matter. As long as you can see a pretty good difference, that's really all there is to it. And then with that, we're going to draw another half moon shape, this time on the bottom section of the eyes. We're going to repeat that with an even lighter version. So once more, just bringing this slider up a little bit. And here we're going to draw a circle on the bottom of the eyes in the middle. So already there's quite a bit more life, but what's going to make the biggest difference is adding a big or a couple big highlights. And we're going to do that on a new layer above the pupils. So a new layer, we're going to rename that new layer to highlights. And here we're going to use pure white, so you could go ahead and select that really easily. And we're going to draw a nice big circle like this on the top right corner of each eye. So once more, if you're working with Procreate, you can quickly draw a circle, then hold your pencil on the screen and tap with a finger, and Procreate is going to make it a perfect circle. I'm going to draw a slightly smaller one here on the bottom. It's already so much more lively, this one, than this one, as you can see. You could go ahead and manually draw them on the other side, or you could just duplicate the layer like we've been doing, and then just move the lights as needed. Now once we have that, we're just going to merge all the layers we have related to the eyes. So from the eyelashes down to the eyes, you're just going to squish them all together. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to draw the rest of the facial features, so the nose, the mouth, and the ears. So go ahead and create a new layer. Rename it to nose, mouth, and ears. And we're going to start with the ears here because it's super, super simple. So go ahead and just grab whatever color you've been working with for your skin color. And just like we did with the eyes, we're going to play with the slider here, but instead of bringing it to the right to make the color lighter, we're going to bring it to the left to make it darker. So the exact color, again, does not matter. It should just be a little bit darker than your skin color. And you're going to use that to add this little shape right here in the ear. And we're going to add a little bit more details to the ears. And for that, just go ahead and use an even darker, but this time more saturated. So this slider right here in the middle, version of your skin color, which in the color palette, it is this one right here. Once more, the X code is going to be on the top right of the screen. But you can see it is just slightly darker and less gray than the one we had underneath. And what you're going to do here is just outline the top of that little shadow we have. And then add a couple slightly curved lines like this. The nose is super simple. It's going to be aligned with the bottom of the eyes, and it's going to fall roughly between both of them. And it's this little shape like this, so a straight line that then curves down a little bit. The mouth is also quite simple. You have a couple options. You could stick with that color and draw kind of like a, the rounded W, which looks like a cat mouth. Well, you see those sometimes in Chibi characters. That's not my favorite, so I'm going to draw a big open mouth. And for that, I'm going to use a nice deep burgundy color, which is the color I'm going to use for my outlines later. It is this one right here. And I'm going to place the mouth pretty much in the middle, vertically, of this square. And the outer corners are going to align both with the inner corner of the eye and the outer edge of the nose. And we're going to add some quick teeth and a simple tongue. And for the teeth, I'm just going to use the same color I used for the white part of the eye. And draw this shape right here, leaving a little gap at the top. I went a little bit too far, so I'm coming back in with my deep burgundy like this. I'm going to go with a pink for the tongue. I'm going to pick a kind of a salmon-y, dusty one, but again, just use whatever one you want. And I'm going to draw this simple tongue shape right here, this time touching the bottom of the mouth. But then coming back in with my burgundy and just adding partial outlines like this. Okay, so we're almost done with the face. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some blush on the cheeks. And for that, I'm going to use the same pink I've been working with, but I'm going to go on a different layer that is going to be above the head but under the eyes. And I'm going to rename it to blush. And I'm also going to pick a nice softer brush. So in the airbrushing pack that comes with Procreate, the soft brush right here. Let me see the size real quick. Yeah, that works. Around 10%. And we're just going to gently place a little bit of blush under each eye. Now, in order for that blush to stay within the head shape, we're going to apply this blush layer as a clipping mask on the head. So just tap on the blush layer. It's like clipping mask right here. It's going to bring up that little arrow. And then what that means is now the blush stays within, yes, the head shape. To really go in with that chibi effect, we're also going to add some little lines under the eyes, for the lack of a better term. And for that, we're going to go back to the brush we've been working with before. In the inking pack that comes with Procreate, the free option would be the Studio Pen. But I've been working with my own brush, the Ultra Smooth Tracing. And all we're going to do here is make that color a little bit darker and a little bit more saturated. So you could just drag the color on your color selector here. But again, just a darker version of whichever blush color you've been working with. And we're going to draw 3 little slightly slanted lines. Repeating on the other side. And that's it. And I forgot a little detail under the mouth. If it is wide open like mine, go ahead and color pick the color you use for the nose. And then with a smaller brush, probably 3%, go ahead and just add a little curved line like this. Oh, and I also forgot the ear on this side. Oops. So we're just going to add this curved line like this on the ear, and that's really all there is to it. Now the last thing we're going to do on the face is adding some eyebrows. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything you have so far except for the colors and the guides, and rename that new layer to eyebrows. And here, pick what you think is going to be your hair color. Again, it doesn't need to be exact for now. I'm going to pick this brown right here. And we're going to draw long, thin eyebrows. And the placement is up to you depending on the emotion you want for your chibi. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to align the top of this eyebrow with this corner here in the grid. So essentially something a little bit like this. Oh boy, my shape is a little bit wiggly. Then for the other side, it's going to be the same basic shape, and you can use the grid as your guide once more. Now once you have both of them drawn in, make sure that they're fairly similar. Like this one is thicker, so I'm just going to come back with my eraser and just gently erase the bottom a little bit so that they're slightly more even. And that was it for the face. Once more, feel free to pause the video here if you need more time to work on the facial features. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the next step of this video, which is going to be all about customizing your character and actually making it look like you. If you're not sure what your mini-me should wear, don't worry, I actually created a bonus outfit idea sheet to go with this tutorial. But here's the catch, it was sent only to my email list on the day this video went live. This is one of my email exclusive freebie, and they are one day only. Once they're sent, they are gone. So if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one, go ahead and subscribe to my emails now. The link is in the description below. Oh, and if you downloaded the free Chibi template earlier, then you're already subscribed and good to go for future email exclusive freebies. Okay, so at this stage, we won't need the grid anymore. It's kind of distracting, so you can go back in your wrench icon menu here in the canvas submenu and just deactivate that drawing guide toggle. It's not lost forever. If you need it again, you can always go back, but at least it's not going to be right in our face. Another thing that is going to make drawing the clothes and the hair quite a bit easier is having a reference picture of yourself. Now that picture does not need to be your most flattering picture ever. It does not need to look good in the sense that it doesn't need to be in a nice environment. It doesn't need to have nice lighting. We just want to use a picture, or we just want to have a picture, I should say, that we can use to reference the clothing and how your hair behaves. Once you have that picture, we're going to add it as a layer within our illustration. And to do that, you can go back to your wrench icon menu here. In the add subsection this time, we're going to say insert a photo. It's going to open up your camera roll, and then you can just go ahead and tap on whichever photo you want to use. So you can see it doesn't need to be pretty. That's not the most flattering picture of me. The light is not nice. But I know that this is essentially my outfit I've been living in these days as a toddler mom in the middle of spring, summer in Montana, where it's very, very hot and very, very cold. It just changes all the time. So shorts and sweater, for some reason, have been doing it for me. So this is what I want to use as my reference in terms of the clothes. And that's really all that matters. Now I'm going to make it a little bit smaller here. So using my arrow tool, setting it to uniform so that I don't distort it. I'm just going to put it right here on the top. And I'm kind of mirrored. I'm waving because I took the picture for the tutorial, which is handy, but it's not the same side. So I'm going to use flip horizontal here so that it is in the same side as my character. And what that picture can do for you is many things. It can give you inspiration. It can also help you understand how clothing behaves. So, for example, let's say you want to draw a sweater and you don't really know how a sweater works. Well, you can look on Google and try to understand. But if you add a picture to Procreate itself instead of just looking at references online, it's going to allow you to sketch on the picture so that you can really, really understand how the different lines come together, how the different shapes add up to create whatever element you're trying to draw. So let me give you a quick example here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the layers I have related to my characters. So from the body to the eyebrows, by swapping them toward the right with one finger, and I'm going to create one group right here so that I can easily just hide whatever is related to my character illustration and only have my reference picture here, which, by the way, I'm going to rename to reference. And then from there, if I create a new layer above my reference and I pick a super bright color, I don't know, let's go with this bright red. The exact color doesn't matter at all here. I'm going to be able to trace, and I know tracing is pretty controversial, but what I'm trying to do here is not trace to use the traced image in my final illustration. I'm just trying to trace so that I can get a feel for how the fabric is behaving, how the clothing element, or how the clothes, I should say, are built. So here I'm just really outlining very quickly so that I can see, yes, the basic shapes that create a sweater. So if I go ahead and hide my reference now, I have an outline of a sweater that, depending on how your brain works and how used you are to references and just drawing in general, this outline might be easier for your brain to understand than just this big blob of a picture. And so once you have an outline of an element of clothing that you want to draw, then it's quite a bit easier to understand how it works and then apply that to your chibi. So again, you would not use that traced article of clothing and just put it on top of the chibi because it's not going to be the same style at all. This is realistic proportions with actual flow in the fabric. This is really not what we need here for the chibi, but it is a super easy trick you can always use to better understand some different elements and then stylize them and add them to your illustrations. So now I have this quick outline of a sweater, and I know that's what I want to draw on my chibi. So I'm going to go back here on within my illustration group, which might as well rename that group to illustration. And I'm going to create a new layer. It is going to be, let's see, below the hand but above the hand. And I'm going to rename that new layer to sweater. And for the sweater, I'm just going to work with the same color here I have in the middle of the eyes. But that's another great thing you have with references. You could just go ahead and color pick, hold your finger on the reference and color pick that exact color. Mine, again, the light is not great. I don't really love the colors in that illustration, or in that photo, sorry, I should say. So I'm just going to pick that green I have here in my eyes. And then with that, I'm going to reference what the shape of the sweater is here and apply that to my chibi. So I have these essentially two triangular shapes here that are for the hood part. And then the rest of the coat you can see is super baggy and just goes right down to the waist and right down to the wrist. So with that information, I'm just going to apply it to my template basic chibi shape I have here. So I know it's baggier, so I'm going to go slightly outside the lines I already have. I know it goes down to the wrist, so I'm just going to bring it down to the wrist. Same thing on the other arm. And then again, the sweater is kind of baggy, so it's going to be just creating an even bigger bell shape that we had. And the bottom is going to be this wobbly curved line like this. And that's really it. Now we lost the information for these two triangles, but we're going to add them back later with the outlines, so don't worry about it too much right now. And so you can use this technique of drawing over your reference for all the different clothing element we have. The next thing I'm going to draw is pretty simple. It's just some shorts, so I'm not going to really bother. But if you have something more complex like a skirt especially, or a dress with a lot of folds, then this really is a technique that can be helpful because you can see how the folds behave and then recreate something similar on your chibi. The shorts are going to be between the hand and the body because again the hand slightly overlaps, and that way we're going to be able to have the proper overlap. So a new layer between the hand, between the body. I'm going to rename mine to shorts, but rename it to whatever you're drawing for the bottom part of the clothes. And I'm going to use the same charcoal I used for the pupils here. But again, super simple. I'm going to quickly hide my sweater here. So slightly curved lines in line with the fingers here. And they're big, wide, flowy shorts, so they're not going to follow the shape of the leg really. They're just going to do their own thing. I recommend here being pretty quick when you trace the basic shape so that you can fill it in as soon as possible, because seeing the shape filled in as opposed to just outline, it's just easier to see what it looks like that way, I think. And so just do a quick sketch first, then fill in the shape, and then tweak as desired. And I'm going pretty quickly here over the specifics of what I'm drawing because again, this is something you're going to customize. So there's no point for me to tell you exactly the proportions of my shorts. But yes, that trick with the reference picture is really golden, and it might feel a little bit strange at first, and it might not feel super helpful at first, but if you keep using it, it's going to teach your brain how to see things. And at one point, you won't even need to trace over the picture, you're just going to be able to see the main structure lines in the reference picture itself, and then just go from there. So once I have my shorts here, I'm just going to reactivate my sweater. And now that I see the overlaps with the short, I find like this bottom part is way too floppy. So that's what I meant with, when I said just quickly draw your shapes. You're going to get more information the more you draw, and you're going to be able to make better decisions the more you draw. Now we do not see it in my reference picture, but another part of my outfit is ankle socks. So as you can tell, it's probably good that I'm not on camera that often because I am far from a fashion icon. But yes, so I'm going to draw ankle socks as well on my feet. If you wanted to draw something a little bit more elaborate, make sure that you see the footwear you want to draw in your reference picture, even if you just need to take a second one so that you can use the same technique we used before of outlining the main shapes and then using that as information to translate it to your illustration. So I'm going to create a new layer below the shorts but above the body, and I'm going to rename that new layer to socks. And in here I'm going to go with an off-white, I think just the same one I've been using for the eyes and the teeth. That way it kind of ties the different parts of the illustration together. If you use something that you use on the top of the illustration on the bottom, it kind of makes it all coherent. Same thing if you use something on the right and on the left. It just makes it more balanced, I guess. But socks, super, super, super simple. You just outline where you want the top of the socks to land. Outline the foot. Fill it in. And that's really it. It's nothing more complicated than that for the clothes. Chibis are super stylized. They're very simplified versions usually of the shapes that you would see in realistic illustrations. And so as long as you get the rough idea of what the clothing element is, that's really all that matters. So really don't put too much pressure on yourself here. Just do something quite simple and it should work perfectly fine. This month marks the 5th anniversary of my YouTube channel, and I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much to every one of you who've been watching and drawing alongside me over the years. To celebrate, I'm hosting a giveaway to give a little something back to the amazing community that we've created here over the past 5 years. So there's going to be 6 winners in total. 3 winners are going to get my inking, stippling, and texture bundle, which are the brushes we're using in this video. 2 winners are going to get my mega bundle, which is every single brush available in my brush shop, which I think is over 400 brushes total. And then 1 winner is going to win the grand prize, which is the mega bundle, as well as my illustration course, Illustration from Scratch. And to enter, super easy. All you have to do is leave a comment below letting me know which one of my tutorials was your favorite. But it cannot be this one, that's not fair. Now, I will choose the winners randomly once this video has been out for a few weeks. I will write the exact date in the video description below once I figure it out. And if you do already own either my brushes or the course, you can still enter. If you do win, I will just refund your past purchase. So good luck, and thank you so much for being here. Before we move on to the hair, I actually want to give you some quick tips on tweaking the colors in your piece or picking the colors in your piece in a very intuitive way. So rather than trying to think of color theory and going off a color palette, playing with the colors and seeing what you like. Now, one way I like to play with the colors is to draw all my different elements on different layers like we've done so far. And then I just go over each layer, and if I'm not happy with the color, I'm just going to change it. And I'm going to do that using some of the tools in this adjustment panel right here. But if you try to do it all at the same time, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So what I recommend doing first is picking the one color you're happy with in your piece. So for example, let's say I'm happy with the skin. Now I would keep everything skin related, all those layers, I would keep them activated. But I would deactivate everything else, boom, and then reactivate just one thing. So let's say the next thing I want to play with is the color of the shirt. So I would reactivate the shirt, go on the shirt layer, or the sweater I should say, and then open my adjustment panel right here, pick the first option, hue, saturation, and brightness, and then play with these sliders here until I find a color that I both like and I feel works well with the other colors that I have in my piece, so in this case, just the skin color so far. So the hue here is what you would call the color. So is it green, is it yellow, is it blue? You know, you get the idea. I think I quite like that one. Honestly, I already had my palette made, so I'm not really going to make any changes. But you could go ahead and just play with the hue and see if there's a color that you like more than what you had. The saturation here is how intense, I guess, the color is. So is it muted and gray, or is it super, super intense? I might actually make my green just a little bit more intense than it was. I'm going to set this saturation to 60%. And then brightness is, well, it's pretty straightforward, how dark or how bright the color is. I liked how it was, so I'm going to keep it at 50%. And then you would just go and reactivate one by one all the layers you have and play with the colors that way. So let's say I'm going to reactivate the shorts. I already know, again, I like them, but I would go back to my adjustment panel, hue, saturation, and brightness, and play with these different sliders until I have a color that I both like and I feel works well with the other colors in the piece. One color I know I'm not a fan of here right now is the eye color, and that's actually my fault. I picked the wrong one in the color palette. I think I should have picked this one instead of this one. And let me just check if that's true. Yeah, it is. Okay, well, that's a good example then. Let's see. I know I want my eyes to be a little bit more on the yellow-green side than the blue-green side. So I'm going to go hue, saturation, and brightness here and play with the hue a little bit just to make them a little bit more yellow. So take all the time you need here to play with the colors to make sure you're super, super happy with them. And once you're done with that, we're going to meet in the next chapter, which is going to be all about adding hair. Okay, so hair is another thing that some people might be a little bit scared to draw because it seems like there's just so much going on, and it seems just, where do you even start, essentially? This video is about chibis in general. It is not a focus video on chibi styled hair. And if I were to cover all hairstyle in this one video, we would be here for days. That being said, I do have some videos specific on drawing cartoon hair, which would totally apply for chibis here. I have curly hair, which includes wavy and coily as well. And I have short hair. So I'll link those 2 videos in the video description below. And those are really great if you want a more in-depth tutorial on how to draw different styles of hair. That being said here, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about drawing hair in general and how to make it feel like chibi hair. A lot of that is going to be with lights and shadows, so in the last section of this video, But at this stage, there's still a few things that we can think about. The first thing I would recommend doing is opening up your reference picture here. And just like we did for the clothing element, or at least I did it for the sweater, you might have done it for the other ones. I'm just going to clear this layer. There's no point for me to create a new one. You can go ahead and just use that same technique on hair. Now, this is really, my hair was not cooperating that day. It needed to be washed. I had been in the crazy wind. That's not hair day for me that I would want to add to my illustration. But still, if I go over and just outline the main shapes that I have in my hair here, I'm going to be able to see, one, the hair texture that I have, and two, just how my hair tends to behave. Again, not that this is my hair behavior that I would want to add to my illustration, but still, it's going to allow me to see, for example, I have this little extra random piece here that is extra curly from postpartum. I just have this regrowth that, is doing its own thing. And overall, I have hair that is really quite long. It's a mix of fairly straight at the top because of the weight, but then as we get lower, it gets more and more curvy. You can see these C and S curves just get more and more pronounced as I get down. So although this is not, again, the hairstyle I want to have in my piece, just outlining it on my reference picture gives me a lot of insight into how to take my hair from a picture and how to turn it into a simple illustration. So I would highly encourage you to do this on a picture of your hair, even if it is not the final hairstyle you want, or even if it is not your best hair day. If it is your best hair day, and if it is the hairstyle you want, that's even better. It's going to make your job easier. But even if it is not, it's still going to give you that insight. This is really the first step to drawing the hair in your piece. The second thing I would say is chibi hair is sometimes exaggerated. So for example, my hair here, it is quite long. If it is on my back and if it's not full of knots like it is right now, it reaches at my hips pretty much. But to have it in chibi style, I would probably exaggerate it and have it either go right down to my feet or at least almost past my butt. So it's all about amplifying what is already there. Similarly, my hair is kind of curly, wavy. There's some texture to it. And then I have this little random section here. So I would try in my illustration to amplify those things and make it more intense. So amplifying the length and amplifying the texture is two tools you have to make your hair stand out and look more like a chibi cartoon hairstyle. The other thing I would recommend you do here at this stage is actually draw the outline of the hair and then fill it in. We haven't done that for the clothes because I wanted you to be able to play with the different colors of the clothes before adding the outlines. And so just drawing the big shapes like this was an easier way to do that. But for the hair, a lot of the hair, especially in the chibi style, is about splitting it in sections. So we're not going to draw every strand of hair, but we're going to draw every section of hair and use that to add the texture. So if you were to just draw a big blob like we did for the clothes, it's not optimal. It's a little bit confusing. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to use the same brush we've been working with for the last part of the facial feature. So that was either the Studio Pen if you're working with free Procreate brushes, or if you're working with my inking, stippling, and texture bundle, the Ultra Smooth Tracing. And we are going to pick a rough version of the color we're going to use for the outline. Now, a lot of the outlines in chibi style are either pure black, or I would say a really nice deep burgundy, which is what I'm going to be working with here. This one on the top right of the palette. Whoops. Right here. And I'm going to create a new layer here so I can test my brush size. I'm going to rename it to hair. And drop it down in my illustration group right under the eyebrows, but above everything else. And let's see the size. I think what I have is pretty close. I might make it a tiny bit smaller. Yeah, 2%. And then with that brush, with that color, I'm going to map out the hair. Now, it does not need to be perfect at all. If it is, then that's great. But what you could always do is start and treat this layer as a rough sketch. And then once you're done with your rough sketch, create a new layer above it and then draw the clean hair. But enough rambling, let's actually draw the hair. Now, I'm going to give you just general hair drawing tips. The first one being, always remember that hair is thick. So you can't just go in and draw the hair to follow the head like this. this, you always need to include an extra padding around the head. And that's one way I like to start drawing the hairstyle, is focusing on the hair on top of the head, because usually it's fairly simple. So in my case, again, the hair on the top of my head, oh my goodness, I can't speak, is very flat. So I'm going to go ahead and draw just that, a fairly flat texture that follows the shape of my head, but is, a little bit further away. From there, I usually like to draw the part because it helps inform how to put the other section of the hair, the other side. In my case, I usually part my hair in the middle, but in my illustrations, for some reason, I put it a little bit to the left. And then with that, I'm going to be able to draw the other side of my hair, which could very well be just one straight line like this, but I want to start giving it more volume. So instead of just one straight line, I'm going to come in and add these extra strands of hair that stack on top of each other like so. Then once I have what I call the cap of hair on top of my head, I like to add how it covers the face. So essentially either the hairline or any kind of fringe you might have. In my case, I don't have a fringe, but I do have that weird hair piece. So I'm going to start by just drawing how the hair falls here on the left side of my face. It's this slightly curvy, kind of this weird S-curve shape like this. And then I'm going to draw one big swoop, exaggerating it. So in my photo, if I bring it back, it definitely doesn't fall in my eye. But again, Chibi hair is about making it a little bit more intense. So I'm going to have it come down, come in my eye, and just be super, super in your face, literally. So that's kind of the top of the hair. Now, how does the hair fall? Well, in my reference, it's just down and over my shoulder, but that's really not how I usually have my hair, if I'm honest. It usually is half down and half up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring this to follow the bottom shape of my head. Maybe add a second little clump here to make it look like the hair is pulled back. And then I'm going to draw the bottom half of the hair following roughly the same shape and structure I have here, but just amplify. So I'm going to poof it. I'm going to also add some little extra curls here and there. Once more, making it longer than it actually is to amplify that feeling of this is long hair. These curves that get progressively more intense as I get down. And then connects back with kind of the nape of the neck on this side. But I said it was half up and half down, not just all down. So I'm going to add this little line here to show some sort of an elastic. And then like the bun. So that's what I mean with a rough sketch. We're not trying to get a perfect line art at this stage. We just want to see what the hair is going to be like, and that's really the main focus. And once you've drawn the main shape, feel free to tweak it. So you could use your arrow tool right here, for example. Set it to warp. And then you can drag different section of that grid that it creates to tweak the shape of the hair a little bit. And then once you're happy with the shape you have, go ahead and create a new layer under this hair layer. And actually, let's rename the hair layer to hair outlines. And the new layer we created underneath this one, we're going to rename to hair. And on that hair layer, we're going to draw the hair that is overlapping with the head. And here, make sure if the hair is behind the ear, you actually draw the hair behind the ear. You don't just go and do it like this, because otherwise you're going to hide the ear. And so make sure you just follow the shape of the ear here, and the shape of the cheek and the chin. And then in your case, you might be done if you have short hair. But if you have longer hair, we're going to create a new layer below everything else, but still within the illustration group. So you might actually have to put it above the body and then just put the body above. Otherwise, it might just fall out of the group. And we're going to rename that new layer to hair as well. And then on that one, you can draw, in my case, I'm going to draw the part that is down. And here, because it is, because the layer is below the body, I don't have to worry about trying to follow the shape of the arm and everything. I can just draw one big line that reaches behind the body, and that'll be totally fine. Like that. And then I'm going to create one more layer for the bun. I'm going to drag the hair above so that the bun is the last layer in the group. And I'm going to draw the bun. And then last but not least, I'm going to need the elastic, which I know I want to have as the same color of the shorts. So yet one more layer between the hair and the bun. Super simple, this little shape right here. So feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to work on your basic hair shape, and then once you're done with that, I'm going to meet you in the next chapter, which is going to be all about adding the line art. And I'm going to give you specific tips for the hair, as well as just general line art tips and tricks. So the next thing we're going to do is add the line art, or the outlines. It is really straightforward because we already have the base drawn, but I still have a few tips for you, especially for the hair. But first, let's talk about the sponsor of today's video, myself. If you've been wanting to learn how to draw your own illustrations, to take whatever is in your head and put it on paper, then consider checking out my illustration course, Illustration from Scratch. This is a course with 10 modules that will teach you everything you need to know to start drawing your own art, no matter your current skill level. You will learn things like color theory, how to add lights, shadows, and create a mood. We will demystify perspective and how to create beautiful backgrounds. You will learn how to make your illustrations appealing with the use of good composition, on top of many other things like drawing realistic and cartoon characters, both the head and the body, as well as how to build good drawing habits and how to get unstuck on days where nothing seems to work. And although it is an online course, you won't be left alone. There are Q&A sections after each module where you can ask me questions, and there's also a private community for the students where you can post your exercises and course project to get feedback from me. So if you want to start loving what you draw, then check out the link in the video description below and make sure to use the special promo code to get the exclusive YouTube discount. I'll see you in the course! So the first thing we're going to do here is create a new layer at the top of our illustration group. And we are going to rename that new layer to line art. Now, as I mentioned in the hair section, Chibi line art is usually either black or a deep dark brown burgundy. So I'm going to pick this color right here. And I'm going to keep working with the brush we've been working with. So the Studio Pen from Procreate or the Ultra Smooth Tracing from my inking, stippling, and texture bundle. And the line art for Chibi is fairly thin. In general, from what I can see, I'm not an expert in any case, or any way, I should say, but it seems to be fairly thin, not like this big, thick comic book or sticker style. So I'm going to go with 2 or 3% as the size for my brush. And then, honestly, you could just go ahead and just start tracing, outlining everything you have in your piece. But I don't want to just leave you like that. I want to give you a few tips so that your line art can be as good as possible. The main thing being, and you've just seen me do this, when you're drawing line art, try to avoid using the eraser as much as possible. I know it might sound a little bit scary at first if it's the first time you've seen me or if you heard me say this at least. Because if you draw a section and you're not happy with it, for example, let's say I don't like this curve, and if I pick my eraser, erase that section, and then try to come back in, there's a few different things that are going to happen. First, the flow of your curve is going to be broken, and so at the end, your line art, if you erase a bunch of sections and then start over again, it's going to look really choppy. But since we're using a brush that has pressure sensitivity and it has different thicknesses depending on how hard you're pressing, how fast you're drawing, and all those things, it's going to be really hard to match the pressure as well I've got a lot of practice with that brush, so it's not too bad, but you're going to usually end up with some thicker spots that suddenly get thinner, or the opposite, where you're joining your line. And so it's just going to create a line art that is subpar. So what I recommend doing instead of erasing is just drawing your line and then just undo and redraw the section until you're happy with it. At first, it might be a little bit longer to draw like that, but believe it or not, the more you do it, it's actually going to become faster than if you were to erase. Now, one scenario in which erasing is totally okay is if the line goes too far. For example, that one was too far, so I'm just going to erase that section. So that's one tip about line art in general. The second tip would apply mostly to hair, and it is to use a line art as a way to show texture. So in Chibis, we're not going to really get a lot of texture within the colors and the lights and shadows. The textures are mostly going to be shown with these detail lines, this line art, the outlines. And what I mean by that is here to show that this is hair and not just, a flat brown blob. What I'm going to do is come in and add some extra strands here within the main shape that roughly match the outside shape. So I'm not going to just come in and add straight lines. That would make no sense. I'm going to have essentially a hybrid between these two lines here. So a soft S-curve. And you're going to do that for chibi hair for big clumps. Now, granted, again, I'm not a chibi expert, so this hairstyle is not super Chibi specific. It has a lot of my style within it as well. But if you look at Chibi examples, you're going to see that often the hair is broken down in big clumps. And so that's what you're trying to do here as well, is take your big blob and add some lines to separate clumps to then make it look more like hair. But yeah, here really what you're trying to do at this step is add all your line art, so the outlines between the different shapes, as well as extra details you need to add to show the texture of some element or some information that is otherwise missing. Like for example here, when I had, I deleted it. Well, when I had my sweater example, I had the neck part that was these two little triangles, and I lost those when I filled in my shape, so I'm just going to add them back as line art details. And same thing here for the drawstrings, I lost those as well, so just adding them back. And another way to enhance your line art would be to have different thicknesses depending on what the line art is about, I guess. So if the lines are around the border of an element, so if it is the outline, then those lines would usually be thicker compared to the lines that would be used within an element to show details or textures. So for example, the line around the edge of the hair would be thicker than the lines to show different strands within the hair. So go ahead and pause the video here and take all the time you need to draw your line art so you get something that looks a little bit like this. So as you can see, I outlined pretty much everything. I added texture in the hair. I added, these little details here on the neck of the shirt. I separated the fingers, added this line here to separate the arm from the body. Same thing with the legs. We can't see it too well, but it's still there. But there are a few things that I did not outline. I did not outline this section here in the ear because it's more like a shadow than a separate shape. You can outline it if you want, but it's going to look very intense. I did outline the outside of the irises, but I did not outline the lights because this is a highlight. Light should not be outlined. And I realize here I forgot the eyebrows, so I'm going to add that. Otherwise, that's really it. Feel free to use my example as a reference. You might also just hide the drawing guide to see what you're doing a little bit better. I definitely should have done that. That's easier. And then once you're done with that, we're going to move on to the last section, which is all about adding the lights and shadows. Awesome. So adding the lights and shadows is fairly simple. I'm going to guide you through exactly how to do it, but it's going to make a huge, huge, huge difference. So the first thing we're going to do is just clean up our file a little bit. So I'm going to delete my sketch layer. I'm going to delete my reference as well. I'm going to delete the colors and delete the guides so that I just have this illustration group left. And I'm going to delete my hair sketch as well. I'm also going to add a background color that is not white so that I have a better feel for what the final piece is going to be. So if you want to have your character in a background that is like a full-on illustrated background, then go ahead and add a color that would be similar to the average color in the background. And you can do that by tapping on the background color layer right here that comes with every Procreate canvas and just picking your color here. I'm going to go with an off-white, kind of an eggshell. And the code for that color is CDC AC2. Okay, so shadows, there's a few different ways you could approach drawing them. You could just take every color, manually make it darker, and then draw shadows. Oops, I'm not on the right layer, but go back on each layer and then draw the shadows that way. I would like to be a little bit more efficient. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw my shadows all with one color on one shadow layer. So you can go ahead and create a new layer above the illustration group and rename it to shadows. And in order for that one color I'm going to pick for the shadows to work and actually look like darker versions of all the colors I have underneath, I'm going to use what is called a blending mode. So if I tap on the little N here next to the check mark, I'm going to have not only the opacity slider, but I'm also going to have this list here of, yes, blending modes. And so here we're going to pick the one at the top, multiply. It's a perfect blending mode to use to add shadows because, yes, you can just pick one color and then Procreate is going to take that color and just turn it into a darker version of the other ones underneath. Another thing I'm going to do is set my opacity to around 50% because that way I can draw my shadows very quickly and then at the end decide if I want more intense shadows, bring the opacity up, or less intense shadows by bringing the opacity down. And the color you use here for the shadows is totally up to you. Actually, I should not have deleted my color palette. I had the shadow color in there. Luckily, I still have the hex code, so I'll import it there. But yes, you can pick any color of your choice. The only thing I would recommend is avoiding a neutral gray because that's going to make your shadows look muddy. So having some sort of a hue in your shadow is going to make your shadows look much richer. And it's also going to help you, just give more life to the piece. I usually like to work with a grayish purple. In this case, I'm going to go with a grayish rosy purple. And so let me see, the X code here was 7A5053. And if you still have the color palette, it was the color on the very bottom right here. And so if I give you an example here, you can see now if I draw, that rosy color changes based on the color that is underneath, and it creates this really nice, rich shadow color. So you could go ahead and just add your shadows that way, just kind of go over the different shapes and draw them in. But if you do that, you're going to have to try to stay within the shape, which you can totally do, but it takes a little bit longer. So another little trick that you can do here is go back to your illustration group and duplicate it. And then if you tap on it again, you're going to have this new menu here that opens. And if you select flatten, it's going to merge all the layers within that group. So you should have this new layer with the illustration and then your illustration group still underneath. And then what that is going to allow you to do is create a selection with the illustration. And that selection is going to allow us to tell Procreate to just draw the shadows within the shape of the illustration. So to do that, go ahead and take two fingers and hold it onto the new layer you created, which is going to automatically bring you in the selection menu here. And you're going to have only your character selected. And if you go back on the shadow layer still with that selection activated and tap on it twice to open up the layer menu, you're going to be able to select mask right here. And that's going to create a new layer, I guess, above your shadows named layer mask. And you're going to have here in white the shape of your character and in black around it the rest. And then if you exit the selection, and select the shadow layer itself, not the layer mask. If you draw, now it's going to stay within the shape of your character, so it's going to be much easier to add your shadows because you're not going to have to worry about staying within the lines. Well, you're going to have to worry about staying within the lines within the different elements, but at least not within the outline, the big shape of your character. Now, the last thing we're going to do before actually drawing the shadows is hide or even just delete that new layer we created with the character because we still have all the layers underneath in the illustration group. And we're going to take the line art and put it above the shadows. So taking it out of the illustration group and at the very top of our layer list. But then going back on the shadows, let me see which size we're going to use for the brush here. Probably somewhere between 7 and 10%. We're going to be able to come in and add very, very simple shadows. Chibis have a wide range of shading. Some is really realistic, some is, very simple. We're going to go kind of in between, maybe more towards the simple side. And we're going to pretend that our light source is on the top right here. So we're going to look at each element, and then under that element, so on the bottom left of the element, we're going to add a shadow. So if I go here, my light is on the top right, it's going to hit this silly part of my hair. And so under the silly part of my hair, I'm going to have a shadow. So I'm going to go over and show you where my shadows would be in my piece. But if you're drawing yourself, then the shadows might not be exactly the same, but they should be fairly similar. I'm also going to have a shadow under this hair piece right here. And in my mind, this is kind of a strand that goes above this one. Or like this is kind of a hole, I guess, in the strand. So I'm going to add a shadow here as well. Already just that brings the character to life so much. I'm also going to add a very thin one here under this clump of hair. My brush might be a little bit big for that, but oh well. Oops. Just like that. Then the head would be creating a shadow on this part of the hair. So I'm going to draw a big shape here that encompasses all the bottom part of the hair here. Go around the ear and fill that in. And I just realized I hit my screen here and add a little blob and went out. So I'm going to erase that real quick. I'm also going to add a shadow on the bottom part of the bun. Something like this. And because I have the mask, we can't see, but when I'm drawing my big shapes, let me undo and redo. I'll show you. I'm going to hide the mask so I can show you. When I draw my big shapes here, I draw the shape I want within the illustration. And then when I'm out of the illustration, I just draw a big, quick shape so that I can close in my line and then fill it in. But then when I activate my layer mask, you can't see that big blob that I just drew. So it's a way to be a bit quicker, essentially. Now this part of the hair, I could technically have it all dark, but that's a bit boring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw only some of the sections, like some strands as shadows, and leave some other ones not shaded. So really breaking up the hair in clumps. And here I'm going super quickly. So I'm going to come back in with my eraser because this was a little bit too messy. Oops, I forgot an outline there. I'll have to go back and add that in. Same thing on this side of the hair, just kind of breaking it up in clumps with the shadows. And I think I could have used a slightly smaller brush because I keep going out of my lines, but I don't really mind that. I don't think that's really part of the chibi look, but that's part of my style, and so I'm still going to do it, meaning having kind of messy shadow lines here. I like the look of it, so I'm going to keep it like that, but if you prefer to have super clean coloring, then you could always come back in with the eraser, of course, and clean up your shadows that way. That's kind of it for the hair, so you can see what I mean with just breaking up the big shape with little sections. It's very simple, but it really adds a lot of life to the hair. The rest of the shadows are fairly straightforward. We're going to add one under the head, of course, because yeah, the head would be definitely casting a shadow on the shirt. So I'm going to follow the shape of the arm here, or the shoulder, I guess, and add a shadow there. Add a little shadow here on that part of the hood. Okay, my brush is way too big for these little details. I'm going to go down to 7%. One on the neck as well. And then a little one here on this shoulder. I'm going to add one big one at the bottom of the arm like this. One at the bottom of the sweater, so this kind of big curve that has a little bit of a wobble at the bottom because the bottom of the sweater has a wobble too. And then on the bottom left of each section of the shorts, which must be really hard to see right now on screen, but trust me, it is there. And last but not least, well, almost last but not least, a little bit right here on the legs. So the shorts are casting a shadow on the leg, which is why we have this shadow here on the top of the leg. And then the back of the leg is going to be shaded as well because it is far away from our light source, which is on the top right. And then, last but not least for real, we're going to have just the tiniest little line here on the bottom left of the socks. I'm going to make my brush quite a bit smaller, probably around 3%, I think it was, I saw. Just this tiny line. Okay, maybe more like 4%. Like that. So as you can see, pretty straightforward, pretty simple, but it makes a really big difference. And as I mentioned, you can always come back in and adjust the opacity to have more intense or less intense shadows. I'm going to set mine around 60%, I think. So pause the video here if you need more time to work on those basic shadows. Otherwise, we're going to create a shadow under the character. So you can go ahead and create a new layer. Rename that new layer to Ground Shadow. We're also going to use the blending mode multiply, setting it to 50% to start with. And we're going to put it at the very bottom, so under the illustration group. And with the same color, same brush, we're just going to draw a quick oval like this under the character, slightly off to the left. You can then fill it in and use your arrow tool to either rotate it, move it, distort it, and just change it so that it is a shadow that you like. I might make it a little bit less opaque, so maybe 30%. No, less than that, 22. Now we're going to add some highlights on the hair, which is going to make a big difference. But before that, I want to show you a technique you can use if you have long hair to make it a little bit more interesting. And you can use that as well on clothes, but I mostly try to use it on hair, at least for chibi characters, because in my observation, clothes tend to be fairly flat. One thing you can do is add a bit of a gradient in the hair. So if you go back on your hair layer that you need, in my case it is this one right here, and use your selection tool, you can draw a selection around one part of the hair. In my case, I'm going to pick the bottom to make it a slightly different color. So I'm just going to draw this big bean shape here to select, yes, the bottom of the hair, close my selection, and then with feather right here, we're going to be able to add a gradient within our selection. The amount is totally up to you. The bigger amount, the softer your gradient is going to be. The smaller amount, the harsher the gradient is going to be. So yeah, 30 to 40% is a good in-between. And then with that selection activated, we're going to go back to our hue, saturation, and brightness tool that we used before to play or experiment with the different colors on our piece. And we're going to use that to change the color of the bottom of the hair or whichever section of the hair you picked. So in my case, I want it to be brown still, but I want it to be a little bit lighter and a little bit more saturated as well. So let me see here. Not too much, just a little bit. 53% for the brightness and 55% for the saturation. And if I exit and undo, you can see it's a subtle change, but it does bring a little bit more life to the hair. Now I'm going to go ahead and repeat that, but to add a darker section here, the nape of the neck. So selection set to freehand, feathering my selection around 30 to 40%. Hue, saturation, and brightness, but this time lowering the brightness to create that shadow. Might lower the saturation as well a little bit. Could also go ahead and do that around the root, maybe to add a little bit more life there. So going on this other hair layer, selection around the root, so more of an oval this time, feathering it around 30 to 40%, and then using hue, saturation, and brightness here. We'll be lifting the brightness a bit, and the saturation too. Again, just to bring a little tiny bit more life to the hair. So feel free to pause the video here, take all the time you need to work on your shadows. If you want to add some gradients to the hair, that is a very chibi style thing to do, so highly encourage you to do that. And then once you're done, we're going to move on to the final section, one that is very, very easy but makes a massive difference, highlights in the hair. Now there's a lot of ways to add lights to chibis. You can see a lot of different styles. One that I like a lot, and I see quite a lot, is only have lights in the hair. Well, the eyes too, but the hair being the main one. So we're going to do exactly that. We're going to focus on adding lights to the hair. And to do that, we're going to use a similar strategy than we used for the shadows, meaning we're going to use a blending mode in one single color. And the color I'm going to pick here is literally just the color I used for the hair. So go ahead and color pick your hair color. And I'm going to create a new layer above each section of the hair I have. So one new layer above this hair. I'm going to rename it to lights. I'm going to apply it this time as a clipping mask, which is similar to what we did here with this layer mask, but it applies to just one layer right underneath. So it would not have worked for the shadows because we have a whole group and not just a single layer, but it definitely works for the lights here. And I'm going to use the blending mode add for now, and I'm also going to set it to, let's go with 50% to start with. And yeah, with that setup, I'm going to be able to just use that one color, go over the hair, it's going to stay within the shape and make it really, really easy. Now, although I said adding highlights to only the hair is a pretty common thing in Chibi, the way people add those highlights is fairly different. Sometimes you see little kind of wavy patterns like this on the hair. That's one really great look. Sometimes you see gradients, sometimes you see strands, dots. There's so many different things you can do. So feel free to just Google or look on Pinterest for chibi hair and see what kind of highlights you like. The one I really like is so simple. It is essentially just adding these big curves on not quite the root, just slightly under, creating this kind of crown around the hair. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here, but I'm going to take it up a notch and break it up between the different strands of hair I have. So here I have one big strand essentially, so I'm going to create this shape here. But then this strand is different, so I'm going to create a slightly different highlight there. So making it maybe just a tiny bit higher up. And maybe adding some secondary lines like this. And then I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side of the hair. And maybe add some on some strands here at the bottom just to break it up a little bit. But really it's just these basic rounded rectangle that follow the shape of the head and the hair. And then I'm going to lower the opacity probably around, I don't know, maybe 30-ish%. And then we can repeat that exact same thing for the other parts of the hair, making sure we create new layers with clipping masks every time. If you enjoyed this video, then I highly recommend you check out this one in which I'm going to teach you how to draw your own cute fluffy animals. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already to make sure you don't miss any future tutorial. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.